Let's move on now to retrieving multiple values at once. Now this is an example right here of retrieving what we're calling compressed data. This is data for the tag CDT158 from yesterday at 7 to today at 7. So we start timestamps around 7 to the following 7 o'clock. Now I want to apologize right off the bat for calling this compressed data. We use this term compressed data, which has a common meaning that you would think, we're doing some kind of data compression or disk compression like a WinZip or something, when in fact what we're referring to when we say compressed data, we're referring to the fact that this is the data that actually sits on your disk drive after going through all the data compression that we do when we first retrieve data. So if you recall, the way we retrieve data from your data source is we bring it in raw, we do a couple of tests, the exception and compression test, and together we call those things our compression algorithm, or excuse me, our compression settings. And so naturally, as a result, what we say we have when we're finished is compressed data. It's not compressed in, like the way you might think like disk compression. We're basically just throwing out all the values that are not required to reproduce the trend. And what we're doing is we're storing the peaks and the valleys as you see here. So when we talk about compressed data, these are the values we're talking about, the values that represent the peaks and the valleys of your data so that we can reproduce this accurately. So that's what we mean when we say compressed data here. So as you might guess, because it's data after it's gone through these compression specifications, these tests, there is no guarantee that you're going to get values at evenly spaced intervals. These are 2 minutes apart, that's 2 minutes apart, but all of a sudden that's 6 minutes apart, 3 minutes apart, 8 minutes apart, etc. So as you can see, the result of retrieving compressed data is, well, it's not something you should expect to be at evenly spaced intervals. If you want that, we have another option called sampled data, and we'll discuss that presently. So compressed data is the actual data that's stored on your archive. It is data that occurred. We're not making anything up here, but there are going to be unevenly spaced intervals because, as I said, it represents the peaks and the valleys. Now, what do we do about the endpoints when we have compressed data? We said yesterday 7 to today at 7. Does that mean we get a value at 7 and another value today at 7? Actually, by default, you'll notice what we do is we're retrieving this inside that boundary. So we start at 7, we find the first value after 7. If we go all the way down to the bottom, you'll see we get the last value before 7 a.m. the following day. Now that's controlled, or that's something that you have control over with some switches. So let's show you how we actually did this, and then we'll explain those switches. So I'm going to delete this before I do anything else. I just did a Control-Shift down and then over while holding down Shift to delete that whole array. That's something you can do in Excel to speed things up a little when you need to work with these spreadsheets and the arrays that we generate. Now, I'll go ahead and retrieve this, and I'll do this. Let me close everything out. So there's, we'll start from a blank screen here. Let's say we're trying to bring in compressed data. When you bring in this compressed data, you'll use this dialog box here, and you're going to need to supply at a minimum these 3 values: the name of the tag, the start time, and the end time. And of course, we're going to go ahead and put this where we expect to get our results. So I'll choose compressed data. We get this pane appear in which you can start defining what the inputs are. Now you'll notice that there are 2 choices: time range and number of values. And we'll demonstrate number of values second. Essentially the difference between the two. Watch what happens to the end time if you choose number of values. Instead of having a start time and an end time, you simply say, okay, I want X number of values from that start time. So for example, these 6 values after 7 a.m. Now this is the first time that when I fill out this form, there's going to be some things on here that scroll down towards the bottom. And I just wanted to show you this. If you weren't aware of it, you can always drag this off of the pane that it's locked to. You can choose this move option or just grab it right here and drag it and resize it. So for example, let me go ahead and choose move. and then I can resize this to whatever size I want. I wanted to open this up because as I'm working with this, I don't want to have to keep scrolling up and down, and you probably won't want to do that either. Now I've got just about everything I need on the one screen without having to scroll. And you can always lock that again by doing this double click, and then unlock it again by just grabbing and dragging this out again. So now that I've got this, so that I can see the whole thing at once, let's go ahead and fill in the three requirements: the tag name, the start time, and the end time. It's simply a matter of making the cell references. Now we have an optional filter expression that we're going to talk a little bit more about later on, well, a lot more about, and we'll demonstrate it. This is a filter expression that allows us to simply retrieve a subset of the data that we would ordinarily, whatever is going to match that filter expression. So, and that filter expression is using performance equation syntax. We'll demonstrate that a little later on. Now next, I'd like to choose this option right here called Show Timestamps. The result of this is going to be we're going to see the pairs, the value and the timestamp next to each other. And there's some other options here we'll go over in just a second. Let me just go ahead and acknowledge this so that you can see what the result is. And there we go. Since I chose Show Timestamps, we are showing the timestamps and the values as pairs.